is a dwarf river birch as well. Fox Valley. Let's go. Oh, it started? Okay. Did I press it? Okay, here we are. Good morning. Welcome to Let's Get Growing Facebook Live. We're going to take a little walk around the garden today and see what's going on. We had a bit of frost last week, a little crazier than we would have liked. We actually hit -4 here. So we had a bit of damage. Let's just see here. I'm going to switch around. So you can see here's some of the damage. This is our Devil's Walking Stick Aurelia. It's amazing how many plants are tender when the leaves come out, but perfectly hardy when it's just the stems. So I'll show you a little bit more damage as we go around. We're going to take a little walk, show you a few things going on in the garden today. Some nice weather has started to get things going. First thing we're going to look at, and this always kills me. We had this area of periwinkle, which is a bad thing on most people's lists these days. Pretty much everybody. But it was a kind of a rare one. I'll come down to the flowers here. And many of the flowers on this variety are double blue. You can see the double blue flowers here. You know, I guess slightly more exciting than regular periwinkle. And we planted it, a friend gave it to us, and it's doing what periwinkle does. But what I wanted to show you was a plant that not a lot of people grow, but should, and that's epimedium. So this is one variety of epimedium. This is Epimedium warleyense. Now, it has very unexciting flowers. I'm going to get right in close. You can see the flowers are very tiny, not exciting. But as I zoom out, notice that the periwinkle cannot overtake the epimedium. Epimediums are so dense and so tough that the periwinkle cannot overtake them. I have never touched this epimedium to clean up periwinkle out of it, and it does this every year. And we're underneath this big spruce tree in an extremely dry shade with late afternoon sun, and the epimedium is fantastic. It never gets irrigated. It always looks this fresh all year long. It's just a wonderful plant. There's lots of varieties available. I'm sure we're going to bump into a couple of more today, but it's something you need to look for. Not a lot of garden centers carry them, unfortunately. Not a lot of growers grow a lot of epimediums because they are a bit slow from the growing and propagating standpoint. So you have to look around a little bit to find them, but they're out there. We'll look at a couple more. I'll give you a couple of names as we travel around. So we're just jumping through the shade garden here, and things are really starting to come to life. So I'm going to show you a few other plants. I'm going to switch over to this one. This is another one of my favorite plants in the garden, is this guy right here. Very unusual clump. Nice and healthy and fresh. Neat flowers, kind of hiding under the stems. This is Lamium orvala. Does not look anything like the lamiums that most people think of, but really is a stunning plant for the dry shade garden. Again, we're here back of the house underneath a couple of white pines. They get dappled shade here all day long. They get rarely irrigated. We've got another epimedium tucked in right at its feet. This is Epimedium fronleighton. So it's got that wonderful copper tone to the new foliage and bright yellow flowers. A little bit showier than the last one, but doing exactly the same thing. You can see it here. Now this one does get a few plants growing through it, nothing too serious. One plant that grows around it is the Pulmonaria rubra redstart, which is right here. Super easygoing Pulmonaria, one of the first plants to bloom in our garden. This Pulmonaria has been in bloom since the 1st of April, and it does that every year. Also in this part of the shade garden, mingling with the lamium, is some hellebores. And again, they love this kind of conditions. So it's amazing what will grow in the dry shade if you really sort of work at it a little bit. I'm going to jump over here. Ignore the few weeds that you see, because there are a few weeds around. But I'm going to switch the camera back around again. We've got some wonderful Spanish scillas growing here and coming into bloom now. This is a touch earlier than they normally do, but that's okay. This is Hyacinthoides hispanica, the white form. Sort of our version of what we can grow, because we can't grow English bluebells. And again, around it, one of my favorite perennials, especially when they emerge in the spring, Rodgersias. Absolutely fantastic plants, like sculptures when they come out of the ground in the spring with that bronze coloration. And surprisingly, we'll probably see a couple of more Rodgersias. Surprisingly, Rodgersias are normally recommended for moist, like waterside edges, pond edges, things like that. That one you just looked at is growing in very dry shade and doing exceptionally well. They don't get as big as they normally would in moist conditions, but they still put on a great show and really are wonderful plants, even if the conditions aren't ideal for them. I'm going to show you a little bit more of the frost damage, and this one always gets me. Look at those hostas. Amazing that a hosta, as hardy as they are and as tough as they are, if you get a late frost, you will kill the foliage off. Now, we'll cut that foliage back. It will come back again. But it always puts a little check in the beautiful unfurling of the hosta foliage. Coming back down into another shade garden here. There's not too much to see in this garden yet. A lot of geraniums coming in. Hostas emerging. You can see the hosta nigricans there, looking really nice. One thing I think is funny is we have this crazy sweep of forget-me-nots in the garden, which are beautiful when they come into bloom, except they're all blooming in our pathway. Look at the garden beds are empty of forget-me-nots, but there they all are in the pathway. As soon as they start to look tired, we rip them out. There'll always be more seedlings for next year. Another plant to keep in mind, even for this time of the year, are the hellebores. Hellebores are amazing because we've looked at these already this year when they were in full bloom. Now they're finished blooming and making seed. But because of the way the flowers are structured in a hellebore, they still look really, really good, even as we're getting into the latter part of May. What's amazing is, so the part that colors up on a hellebore is not the flower petals, it's the sepals. So this part here is what protects the flowers when they're in bud. And the actual petals on a hellebore are these little things right here. And they're basically, the petals are reduced to nectar tubes. So that's where the nectar is. These are the petals. Nectar comes at the base of the tubes there. Now the plants are going to seed. And here's the seed pod here. And looking very interesting in the, still when the plant is long finished blooming, but still looks good. All right, we're going to creep around. We go up into the sun or down into the shade. We'll go up into the sun. Another plant that I think that's a really cool perennial, switch around again here, is this guy. It's a little bit bright, so maybe you might not be able to see him too well. This is a really neat perennial. This is Saruma henryi. And sort of what it is an upright wild ginger. It has these wonderful wild ginger-like leaves and tons of these bright yellow flowers on really interesting clumps of foliage. And the flowers will bloom for about a month or so, maybe a bit longer. And in our garden here, they're gently reseeding, so I'm really quite happy about that. There's a nice shot of what the Saruma henryi look like. Really different foliage texture. Again, not an easy plant to find, but it does come available every now and again. I'm going to shoot through. Our Virginia bluebells are doing fantastically well this year. They're spreading all through the garden, which is great. The hummingbirds love them. One of the first plants the hummingbirds come to when they come back are the Virginia bluebells. The flowers tend to be a little pink when they first emerge, and then they turn blue quite quickly. And every once in a while, you'll get the odd plant that has a pink flower and stays pink. There was a pink one here a few years ago, but I don't see it anymore. But anyway, Virginia bluebells are a wonderful plant. They're a spring ephemeral. We talked about those last week. They will die down and be overtaken by things like the Japanese painted ferns that are just emerging now. So it's nice to use those ephemerals to get that, spring interest and then have it move on to your summer layer. Let's see where else we're going here. Well, we'll skip over that part. It's a little bit messy, but I'm going to show you one more Rodgersia because I think they're just so fantastic at this time of the year. Here we go. Look at that Rodgersia. Isn't that amazing? Looks like just a bronze sculpture in the garden right now. And this is when I love them. So fantastic. All right, we're going back into the garden again over here. Oh, I just missed the bloom on this guy, but I'm going to talk about him anyway. Just missing the last bit of bloom on this guy. This is a really neat perennial that most people don't think about when they come into bloom in the springtime. They are quite attractive. They look a bit like, this maybe looks a bit like a miniature Simicifuga. Well, that's kind of what it is. This is Actea rubra, or the red baneberry. It's a native perennial, sturdy growth. You can see it's grows a clump like a peony. Wonderful spikes of white flowers in the spring, and then it'll turn into those wonderful glowing red berries in the summer. It's a beautiful native perennial. Yeah, the berries are poisonous, so the animals don't eat them or anything like that. You don't want kids to eat them, of course, but it's a beautiful perennial and great in our dry shade. It's starting to gently reseed around. We're getting little individuals here and there. So it's just a wonderful plant. Very excited to see it growing. As we come around through the bed here, here's another epimedium. Yeah, there we go. There's another epimedium. This is orange coinigan, and it has this wonderful soft orange flowers. They're just finishing, so they're almost done, but you can sort of get an idea of the flowers there. And then again we got some late tulips coming up through the hellebores with some euphorbia chameleon there. And our one nice big gold hosta there did not get attacked by the frost, so I'm happy about that. As we carry on through the garden, we've still got some late hellebores still in bloom. This particular one, I can't remember the name of it at the moment, but boy, it just keeps on blooming. Such a great plant. Now, we've been through this bed, I think, before. We saw some early bulbs in here. Now we're getting into the more late spring, early summer things. The thalictrums are starting to jump. Martagon lilies are starting to bud up. Hellebores, again, still putting on their summer foliage and looking good. And the chocolate-leaved actaeas, which will give us wonderful bloom and fragrance in September. So we're right into that extra layer now. We did this early spring layer. We did a late spring layer. Now we're pushing into that late spring, early summer layer almost. And it's great to see how much you can pack into small areas of the garden. Coming up through the front walk here, I'm going to show you another epimedium, because I just can never get enough of them. This is probably one of the nicest ones. This is Epimedium rubrum. Here's the flowers here. Wonderful red with a white center. But look at that new foliage. Look at the look at the color of that new foliage. Absolutely amazing. So Epimedium rubrum. This is much more of a dense clump forming plant. Some of the epimediums are a bit more of a spreader. This is a real clump former and very, very long lived in the garden. This little patch here was divided off another patch that we've had in the garden for 30 years. One of the first plants we planted. Here's a few more lady ferns coming up through some hostas. Fortunately, they were shaded a bit by a small tree, so they didn't get frozen. But again, what a beautiful look of those. This is Ethereum Lady in red. Great selection of a native perennial fern. This grows in very poor soil, but we irrigate about once a week here. So the lady ferns thrive. Also the Japanese painted ferns, which are a form of lady fern, they thrive as well. We'll zip back for a little quick sniff of the Daphne in bloom today. Fussy plants sometimes, Daphnes. Sometimes they'll go for a long time and be great every year, and other times they'll just give up and die. We've had some Daphnes we've had in the garden for, 8, 9, 10 years, and then all of a sudden they just give up. I don't know why. Seems to be just the way of the Daphne. This is another one, cool little plant that's been blooming, and I'm just going to show you a close-up of the flowers. This is a great little spring shade plant that not very many people know about. Look at the color of those flowers. It's a neat little clump, tidy little plant. This is Lathyrus vernus, or spring vetchling. It's a little non-climbing, clump-forming sweet pea is what it is. And this has a sort of iridescent purple flowers that then, as they die, turn this amazing sort of turquoisey blue color. Really, really fantastic. As we're going through this really shady garden here, the uvularias have just about finished. They're wonderful with their yellow twisted flowers. Another uvularia there with some more epimedium beside it. Then I'm going to come out and look at this little guy here that again looks a little bit like the Actaea we just saw. And it is. This is Actaea pachypoda, or doll's eye. So you're going to get a spike of white flowers like a spring cimicifuga, and then you're going to get a cluster of porcelain-like white fruit in the fall. Really neat, another native woodland perennial that is an easy one to grow in the garden as much as you can find it, because maybe that's the trickier part. Then again, more Ethereums just coming up. The Ethereums and lady ferns and Japanese painted ferns have been the best ferns that we've grown in dry, shady areas. You know, it's not easy to get good ferns for dry shade, but between the Ethereums and some of the Dryopteris or wood ferns, we've got some great choices in the garden. Another good, somebody mentioned the ground cover for shade. I'm going to turn the camera again. We're going to look at this great ground cover for shade. And another native. This is Asarum canadense, or our native wild ginger. This is a dense area. This is very heavy shade. Never gets direct sun hitting it. And the Asarum canadense is just loving this situation. I don't know if it's still blooming. Let's have a look. Oh, the flowers are still there. Let's see if we can zoom in. Not going to win any beauty pageants, but there's the flowers. When they're first emerged, they're burgundy. Now they're just sort of turning brown. But if you look around, they're doing their job, because these are all Asarum canadense seedlings. Right out here, these are all wild ginger seedlings. So it just loves this heavy shaded area here. There's Dutchman's breeches growing in there. The ferns grow in there. We've got some hellebores doing their thing in here as well. And they just love it as well. All right, let's see. We'll turn maybe to one more section of the garden for today. Oh, I'm going to look at this plant here, because I think these are great plants too. I'm sure I've probably talked about them before. This guy here, this is a wonderful foliage perennial. Steely blue foliage. The flowers on this particular one are not exciting, but in other varieties they're fantastic. This is a Sanguisorba. This is Sanguisorba Beth Chatto. Has wonderful foliage and makes a spreading clump here along the edge of the pond. They do like moist soil, and there are lots of summer blooming Sanguisorbas we'll probably look at again. Oh, this is a beaut again too. Old plant. Lots of people have probably had it in their garden over the years. But who doesn't love the way water droplets sit on Alchemilla mollis or lady's mantle? Just a spectacular little vignette in the garden in the morning that after yesterday's rainfall. Just love the way it beads up. Such a wonderful plant, Alchemilla mollis. I know it can get a little bit seedy for some people's garden, but for us, we always just have individuals here and there. It never goes crazy for us. And here we are right beside Dove Wings daffodil, one of the very few daffodils that has been successful in our garden, probably because this area does get irrigated, and it just makes a wonderful drift in front of the pond. And then as it finishes blooming, we get Siberian iris in here and Hakodacloa for the summer. Again, layering, layering, layering. You got to get lots of layers, especially if you got a small garden. Always be thinking about what's going to come next in your perennial border and what you're going to, have for interest through the season. As this garden builds from now through into summer, it'll change every week, and that's really what you want. You don't want to have the same static plants. I know a lot of people say, give me a perennial that's going to bloom from May till October. Why do you want that? Give me 10 perennials that are going to bloom for 3 weeks, from May to October each, and you'll have a much more interesting garden. Do we have any questions, Laura? I know you're following along there.
Well, you already talked about, so there was a question about a non-invasive flowering ground cover that's self-sufficient for the shade.
Yeah, the epimediums, we've shown a few epimediums. They're fantastic.
Lamium was spread too much, so something else.
Lamium's a bit of a spreader. You don't want that. Certainly look at epimediums. Look at Epimedium versicolor sulphureum. We'll take a walk over and see if it's still blooming. Probably one of the best ones for a ground cover because it spreads a little bit faster than some of the others. If you can get that epimedium fronleiten with the bright yellow flowers, it's a winner as well. You just don't see it as much. Okay, so the versicolor sulphureum is just finishing blooming, but this is it here. So we're in amongst the hellebores, the ceruma, and here's the epimedium versicolor sulphureum. Has a wonderful soft yellow flower. I'll see if I can find a couple of flowers in bloom, as there are a few in bloom. There's the beautiful soft yellow flowers. This was just covered in those flowers for the last few weeks, but we are in a heavy shade area here now, and it's a great, great ground cover that will not ever get out of bounds. You know, there's some other neat plants that make ground covers, like our native mayapple, for example. But if you use the native mayapple as a ground cover, you better want a ground cover because it likes to spread. It's not hard to get out. Geranium, Mary Jo and Sophie are mentioning geranium macrorhizum, another excellent one. I'm not near macrorhizums in the garden right now, but I am near another clump of the epimediums there. So think about those. The geraniums are also an excellent choice. Last week we looked at the corydalus and the styloforums. They're still doing their thing. Fantastic plants for the shade. I'm going to zip up and we'll see a little clump of geranium macrorhizum here, seeing as we're talking shade ground covers. So this is geranium macrorhizum right here. The thing about geranium macrorhizum is it's vigorous. It grows to a point. If it starts to get out of bounds, it's easy to pull up because it doesn't spread underground by the root. It sort of spreads on surface runners. So it's easy to keep in check. It has flowers that are white, pink, or that deep magenta pink of geraniums. Foliage is sort of evergreen, so it holds there for the winter as well. And it loves the dry shade. So there's my two big choices for today for dry shade ground covers: geranium macrorhizum and epimediums. Any other questions, Laura?
Did you talk about the exact name of the Rodgersia? That was the other question from
the Rodgersias. You know what? These are Rodgersia pinnatas, Rodgersias sambucifolias. Really doesn't matter a whole lot. Some of these have been in the garden for so long that the name tags are so far buried. I'll switch back over to the leaf again. There we go. Just exquisite. If it's Rodgersia sambucifolia, means it has leaves like a sambucus. If it's Rodgersia esculifolia, it means it has leaves like an esculus or a crab apple. Or not a crab apple, sorry, my apologies. A horse chestnut. Rodgersia pinnata superba would do a similar thing. Any of the Rodgersias. Just plant Rodgersias. Gotta have them. Wonderful things. Here's an esculus just to give you an idea of the similarity in the leaf shape. This is Esculus parviflora, the bottlebrush buckeye. It's a wonderful understory shrub. Can get quite large, but it grows in the shade and it has foot-long spikes of white flowers in midsummer. How can you go wrong with that? Any more questions, Laura? All right, I think we'll wrap up that little walk for today. That's a few plants for you to digest and look for in your garden centers. Our trips, hey, we've still got a couple of spaces on Ireland and South Scotland. We'll be announcing our trips for 2024 very, very soon. But just as a teaser, Chelsea Flower Show's on this week. So that might be a little hint as to our early trip next year. We'll have more information out very shortly. The nursery, watch masonhousegardens.com for nursery open days. We had 3 open days this past week. We'll have a couple of days this upcoming week. We'll be at the Botanical Expo on June 11th for you in the city at the Evergreen Brickworks. We'll talk more about that next week. Let's Get Growing on the radio, Saturday mornings, 9 to 10, CKDO. Go to ckdo.ca. You can listen live there. And we'll see you again next week on Let's Get Growing Facebook Live. Have a great long weekend.